One of the biggest problems with modern video games is not how they're designed, but how players optimize the fun out of them. They quickly rush through the game to say they completed it just so they can move on to the next. They grind only the most profitable activities so they can get the best gear as soon as possible. Then they start playing only the most optimal builds so they can have the easiest time. What happened to just enjoying your time and having fun? Even though I create guides aimed at helping others be more optimal, I try to show how things work to give options while focusing on what's fun about the game, such as the gameplay or interactions. That's why it confuses me so much as to why it's become popular for players to minimize their interaction with the game, then complain that there's no content. One of the ways people do this is through DPS meters. Every time I make a video about PvE, I've got comments asking where my DPS meter is. And there's so many things wrong with that, I can't simply reply my answer in the comments. So I'm going to make this full video to go over why you may want to uninstall your DPS meter. Obviously, DPS meters aren't all bad. I don't think they should be banned. I've used them to theory craft some builds before because they can easily show you where your damage sources are, and I think that some players will be doing tons of number crunching regardless of whether they exist or not. And for those people, the DPS meter really makes life easier. But the thing is, the average person doesn't need or can't even understand them. The information provided by a DPS meter is limited, and not everyone knows how to interpret the data to arrive at accurate conclusions based on that information. For example, the most common mistake I see is when a group wipes, they call out low DPS, damage per second, as their issue, when in reality, they had low DPS because a few players died or because they didn't perform the mechanics properly. So rather than putting more emphasis on damage, they could put more emphasis on survival because at the end of the day, you do no damage when dead. Also, there's a phenomenon that can't be represented by an average number display, and it's that most encounters become more difficult as time goes on. So if you are useful during the easy parts, doing insane damage, but if when the fight becomes rough, your damage and usefulness drops off more than usual, are you really helping that much? Also, if you blow all of your cooldowns instantly to maximize your overall damage, you may not have them ready for when you need to swap targets to take out a key enemy in time, or you may not have them ready for pushing through a particularly dangerous phase. This is why classes that have executes or do more damage to targets below a certain health threshold can be really useful. There are many factors that contribute to your success, like doing mechanics, supporting allies, killing additional enemies that can complicate the situation. For the average player, the information a DPS meter or combat log provides you can often be misleading if you don't know how to properly interpret it. Player A might be doing a lot of damage, but player B is providing more buffs to their team, increasing the team's overall damage more than they could ever individually contribute themselves. Player C may be doing even less damage than both, but they're covering a necessary mechanic that doesn't let them deal damage while they're handling it. You could probably still find information adjacent to this in some third-party software, but let's be honest, the average player isn't going to look that far. They're going to accept that they don't want the full story, but there is still a culture of players who want to ignore all of these role-specific duties so they can brainlessly mash their rotation on the boss to get the highest parses. And these are often the same players who will fail to perform the other mechanics just so they can greed for more damage. It's not realistic to compare your damage to someone who is carrying the mechanics or supporting you. And even if you can compare against a few others who have no other duty than to do damage, who are you realistically competing against? Gamer dads who are playing a class that can play itself while they run to the stove to stir dinner? Or gamer girls who play with one hand while they text with the other? If you want to compete, then join a hardcore guild or speedrunning group where you can control all the variables to get accurate information and find players who have the same goals as you. But if you aren't interested in those, then what is your goal? Is it to get the fight completed? Well, then maybe you shouldn't be interested in a DPS meter because it doesn't get you there. It only distracts you from the real information you need. Yep, we all know those cursed scenes of game footage where the entire screen is filled with third-party software providing every bit of information you could ever want, except for the most essential information, like where your character is. I totally get it if you want to analyze all that information after the raid is over, but there is no way that can be helpful while you're in the heat of battle. If you really want this information, you can hide or minimize it during combat and then pull it up afterwards. There's no need to distract yourself from paying attention to your positioning, the mechanics, and what your team members are doing. This is why game developers usually don't put DPS meters into their game. They know for the average player, it isn't worth it, and it just makes their game look worse. But we all know the real reason people don't hide it during an encounter is because they want an ego boost when they're doing well. By default, these third-party softwares will organize the information from highest to lowest, as if it's some sort of competition. I'm a competitive person and enjoy finding the most efficient ways to do something and struggling to overcome a challenge, but when I join a group, I have the decency to think about everyone else's goals. I like to play new playstyles, which aren't always the most optimal, but at least I try to fulfill the role that's expected of me and to support my allies when necessary. If I just show up with a meta build and ignore any mechanics, then I'm just hoping to be carried. If your team has you covered doing all the mechanics and they never require your support, then so be it. Tunnel vision on DPS. But as soon as you see your teammates need help, and then you decide that you're going to keep doing damage instead of helping, or aren't even paying attention enough to notice they need help, you've put the success of your team below your own agenda. If you're speed clearing, well then your team is going to be wiping over and over to try to optimize clear times anyways. But in that case, you're working with your team toward a common goal, and this video isn't targeted at those 0.01% of players who absolutely would want a DPS meter. I know for a fact there will be comments on both sides of the spectrum saying, I just like to see how I'm doing compared to everyone else to know if I'm doing my job. Or they'll say, I don't need others to tell me how to improve. Unfortunately, a DPS meter is not going to tell you whether or not you're doing your job or how to improve. But at the same time, don't dismiss practice and self-criticism by scapegoating DPS meters. If you want to improve, you aren't going to do so by just flailing and barely getting by. You need to practice your class or build in a more controlled environment, like on a target dummy or DPS golem, or in lower pressure situations, then combine that skill with the knowledge of the fight's specific mechanics. The best way to improve is not actually using a DPS meter, but a recording software like OBS or Shadowplay. Your actions are what's important, not some numbers that loosely represent those actions. Being able to record your own gameplay and then analyze it afterwards not only allows you to see where you made mistakes, because you can't remember everything that happened, but it also allows you to upload it for others to see. Humans are inherently biased and will make excuses for their mistakes or can't understand where they could improve because they haven't experienced the improvements that they could be making. I've always offered to help players by looking at recordings they send me, but players probably don't like to put effort into recording because they don't actually care about improving. So if you want to improve, then focus on your actions and analyze your gameplay, and if you don't want to improve, then stop emulating speedrunners and worshipping arbitrary numbers and start actually enjoying the game. If you like this content, then please consider subscribing and liking the video. If you do want to support me, you can do so by clicking any of the links in the description. And with that being said, enjoy your journey, and I will see you all next time.